Thanks. Are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
Don't touch the computer, for fuck's sake.
I got it. I know how to use this part. I don't know if we need introductions anymore. Chris Valasek, Director of Vehicle Security Research at IOActive. Charlie Miller, Security Engineer at Twitter. Together, we are Wild Stallions. Bill and Ted. All right, a few people got it.
That's why we don't practice the talk, because otherwise I would have cut that joke.
Yeah, you would have cut that. Disclaimer, I think we got some complaints last year. It was like us joking around, which is going to be again, so if you don't like it, doors that way. We have a 90-page paper, 92. It's going to be long. It has all the details. This is a lot of information. This is a year's worth of work, probably more. We can't pack it all into a talk, so get the paper. We're going to release it on Monday. Has everything that we did and more.
It won't be as entertaining, hopefully.
No, not really. PSA before we start. Please, just stop saying whatever you have, whatever thing you make is unhackable, because you're going to look silly.
So here is, I don't know if you guys can read in the back, but this is from some newspaper. A Daimler engineering executive says, there was no way you could hack a Mercedes-Benz from outside the car. And then he goes on to say, you can't really hack it. You have a control gateway, and you have to go through that.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
no way a gateway of any sort has ever been compromised.
Right. It's like, so you mean we have to hack the gateway? Oh, can't do that. So anyway, don't do that.
Overview, we're going to talk about how we got remote code running on the head unit from Wi-Fi cellular, some payloads, and then we're going to talk about the part that took us forever, which was V850 stuff, reversing, then some cyber physical stuff, and then even more fun about disclosure, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and then even though we told Chrysler that we weren't going to drop any new vulnerabilities or whatever.
We're dropping a ton.
We're going to drop them all.
Drop all of it.
Yeah, just kidding. But somewhere in the
sorry,
crowd,
Neil, wherever you're at, we're not doing it, I swear.
A Chrysler executive who just pooped his pants.
Remote attack surface. So, a lot of people think about remote attacks just as this, right? There's telematics, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, tire pressure monitors, all kinds of stuff. We focused on the Wi-Fi and the telematics systems because we felt that would give us the best shot for a win.
So basically there's lots of different ways that cars take input from the outside world. These are some of them. As time goes on, there'll be more of those.
Absolutely. I think in-car apps are probably going to start pushing now. We're going to see all that stuff that people are familiar with.
So that's the first bit of remote attacks is you got to get data to the car somehow.
Yeah. And as we found out, the chips that do that wireless data piece don't usually, or at least in our case, did not do communications with in-vehicle networks, so CAN bus stuff, or LIN or FlexRay, any of that. So you have to figure out a way to get from that remote piece to the piece that communicates with the car, right? Two separate pieces, that's sometimes a hard problem.
All right, so if someone tells you they can remotely hack your car, and then they say something like, oh, and then you could just do brakes or something, they might not realize that the second step is like really hard and tough.
And when we first started this, I think we were under that assumption as well.
Totally,
right?
Yep.
But now we're smarter. CAN message analysis. If you want to send CAN messages that do things, you need to understand their IDs and their data, right? The best way we found to do this is get a car and record them with a sniffer, see what they do, change them, all that good stuff. You need to do this part if you want physical control. You don't have to have, be physically jacked into the car to do it when you're doing it remotely, but you need it to begin with.
All right, so this is the one part where you need a car at least for a little while. So maybe it's a rental or it's your car you own, but at some point you need to figure out how the messages work. It's going to be specific for a particular manufacturer, model year. We don't know exactly what the details are, but you're going to need one at least to look at for a little bit.
Yeah. And we released stuff for a Ford, Toyota, and now Jeep. So there's some information out there. Lastly, CAN message injection, right? You have to find a way from a remote source to make that remote source, send it to the internal source that sends out a message that does cool stuff. This is what you want to do, right? You want to control the car. Turning up the radio's fine, but wrecking in a ditch, even finer.
Speaking of wrecking in a ditch.
Speaking of a ditch.
So this picture is funny. I noticed when I put it in the slide deck that the brakes aren't working in this picture. That's why he's going in the ditch. But the brake lights are on. So you can tell like something is.
So there's probably a physical switch that's the lights and the rest is that.
Right. Anyway, so a little about the vehicle. You want to talk about it?
If you don't know yet, 2014 Jeep Cherokee. I think that's been out there.
It's a nice car.
It's a great car. Like it.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I would drive it. You're welcome, Fiat Chrysler. It has a Uconnect unit. That was the infotainment system, the thing that did communications to the outside world, made by Harman. They do all kinds of audio-video stuff, but they're heavily used in automobiles.
Yeah, so the head unit is basically this thing in the middle that looks kind of like a computer screen. It's a touch screen, and then maybe some of the stuff kind of around it.
Exactly. That's what most people think of as a car computer, right? And if you take these guys apart, you can see there's a screen that you touch. It used a Sierra wireless chipset to do cellular and wireless communications. And then the other daughter board piece was Renesas V850. So there was an air gap, right? Because it's two daughter boards. But in reality, we're going to show you how it wasn't truly an air gap. And this stuff ran QNX.
Right. So the main chip on there ran QNX, and it was an ARM processor, and QNX is kind of Linux-like, and so you could get a shell at some point and run commands, and so it was nice for us because it made us, at least me, like sort of familiar. It's like, oh, although half the commands you would expect to work don't work, but there's usually some kind of equivalent.
Exactly. Real quick, jailbreak. Charlie gave you a teaser last year of the jailbreak during our talk, right? It was a great way for us to learn about the system, dump binaries off, do reversing, sniff traffic, basically everything you want to do when you're trying to hack a system. Invaluable. This absolutely, positively is not required for what we're talking about today, just to make that very, very clear. But, oh, I did the video. I know Max.
So here is just what the effect of jailbreaking are. So now it says, if you can see on the screen, it says jailbroken.
Yeah.
So normally it doesn't say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, if I want to remotely attack some car in California, I don't have to get there with USB stick and jailbreak it. You don't have to do that. But for us, to find out what files there are and play around, it was useful.
You want to go?
Sure. Okay, so we talked about all those different remote attack services, and the first one that we wanted to look at was Wi-Fi, because that was something we kind of understood, where Bluetooth we don't know too much about, and tire pressure monitoring systems I know nothing about. So we wanted to start with something that was kind of familiar, and we started with Wi-Fi. So this is the screen that you get for Wi-Fi, and you'll notice that by default you get WPA2 as your security. So I should mention that the Jeep and some other cars, they offer up a Wi-Fi hotspot, so you can sit in the back seat and get on the internet.
The kids can be on the Nintendo DS going grandma's.
It's pretty sweet. I really like it. In order to do that, you need to have this password to get on WPA2. So if you want to attack a car over this Wi-Fi hotspot that it generates, there's a couple problems with it. One is that it's not on by default. You have to pay for it, and it's quite expensive. So $35 a month. I bought this for a year. So you're welcome.
You're welcome, everyone, for Charlie paying $300.
Yeah, Uconnect or Harman, whoever gets that money, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, not many people are going to buy this. And even if you did find a car where it was on, you'd have to figure out how to connect to the WPA2 network, which is non-trivial. So we'll still talk about that a little bit just to show how it would work, because for a while this is the only way we knew how to attack the car. So the first thing that you'll see is this is the reverse engineering of the way that the password is generated for the WPA2 system. And you'll see that they'd call time on null, and then they figure out a random password link between 8 and 12, and then random characters from lowercase to uppercase ASCII and numbers. So there's 60 of them or something, 62. So the point is you get this really long password that's random, and you can't just guess it very easily.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to guess, and even if you're cracking it, you're not going to be lucky doing it.
Right. But the fact that they based it on time means that there's really only one password for every second that the car would, that second in the time when they would have turned the car on. So if you can figure out what time, the very first time you turn the car on, then you can have a pretty good guess of what the password is. And so here's just some numbers. I do have a PhD in math.
He's pretty good at math.
Yeah, so I can use a calculator as well as the next person. But anyway, if you do the math, you'll find out that if you know what year it is, which you probably have a pretty good idea because it's a car.
It's dated on the car.
Right. You can guess to within it'll take 15 million password tries before you would guess that if you wanted to just care about a month. So it's 15 million per month, and then you can make some other sort of assumptions. But the point is you could imagine doing an attack in an hour. Which is kind of a drag, right? So you'd have to essentially find a car on the highway, drive next to it for an hour.
That's just creepy.
Right.
But Charlie, I ask you, what happens? How does it get the time?
Are you sure we didn't practice?
I know, it's great.
It's amazing. Okay, so yeah. So then you're like, well, okay, fine. Well, how did it know what time it was? Because the very first time you turn the car on, like it doesn't necessarily know what time it is, right? And so this is some of the code that sets the clock initially. And you can see it says get V850 real-time clock. So V850 is like the other chip that we'll talk about later. But it's the one that has direct communications with the cellular network. And so it's trying to get the time through cellular stuff, right? Like how your phone gets time. But it falls down here and it says like if it fails to get that time, it defaults to like the first day of the first month of 2013.
January 1st, 2013, that's the default date.
Right, so I was like, okay, whatever. But I looked at my password and it was this like long, complicated thing. And so there's this mapping between what second the clock was turned on and your password, right? Well, you can kind of go backwards with that mapping too. And so I was like, well, I wonder what time I turned my car on. It's kind of interesting, right? So I looked and it said I turned my car on January 1st, 2013, 32 seconds. And so what that means is when I turned my car on, it didn't know what time it was. It took 32 seconds for the like Wi-Fi thing to kind of like get going. And then it created the password from that. And so...
Yeah, I was going to say, you could imagine cars coming out of a plant, right, being turned on, and they're all have a very small subset of passwords.
Right, so you would expect maybe there only be like 10 or 20 different passwords in reality. So
now you don't have to creep on someone for an hour, you only have to creep on them for a couple seconds.
Yeah. I like how you're so worried about creeping on someone by driving them.
I creep on people all the time.
You don't mind crashing them, but you don't want to like get
yeah, I don't want to get them creeped out, but I don't mind driving them off the road.
Right, so anyway. So it's actually not that difficult to figure out what the password is on WPA2 network in this case. And so you could connect to a Wi-Fi network. But the biggest problem is you still have this issue where they probably don't have Wi-Fi in the first place. So let's just forget about that issue for a moment and power on, which is what you do when you research. So you can run an Nmap scan of the Wi-Fi hotspot. And you'll see there's a bunch of open ports. The one that we care most about is port 6667, which Nmap says is IRC.
We were pretty stoked. We're like, sweet, this thing's running IRC. This is awesome. Great car. Love it. Join pound hack.
Right. I was like, I knew this car was cool, but now I just really love it. So it turns out it's not IRC. It's something called dbus. So if you don't know what dbus is, it's a inter-process communication mechanism. So like different processes can like talk to each other. There's like, it's like RPCs, they can call methods. And so it's way like different processes on a machine can talk to each other. You can set it up, which right away you start to think like, well, probably maybe I shouldn't be able to pretend I'm a process on a machine and talk to other processes.
I would think so. That's how I would design it.
Right, but the designers of dbus thought of that,
yeah.
And they have authentication built into it, so where you need to have like some sort of password or key or something. I don't know because the Jeep didn't have one. So you can see over here on the right, part of the dbus protocol is you can try to auth, and you can say auth, I'm just some anonymous dude, and the Jeep says, okay, you have a session.
So basically this is RPC with no authentication, right? Because you can remotely connect, and then we'll show you can do stuff.
Right. So probably not intended by the manufacturer.
I wouldn't think so.
So we use the program called Defeat, which we'll show you in a second what it looks like. It's like a cool GUI. And then when we wrote our scripts, and not to give away the ending or the teaser, exploits as well, we use something called dbus Python. Okay, so this Defeat thing, you can fire it up. It looks like this. You can see all these like Harman services that you can talk to. And then each of these services has different methods that you can call. And here's an example of using that GUI again to find out for particular services what methods are available. And you can just read down here and see some of the more interesting ones. So there's a service called com Harman service layer manager, and then it has methods like view, DTV, HMI 12, and all this kind of crazy stuff, right?
You can imagine how many things are implemented over this, right? It's probably easy to use, you make calls, it works, everything's strings, awesome, right? So I'm sure there's just methods upon methods upon methods.
Right, so already right now, you could probably imagine doing things to the Jeep that were bad, but of course we want a shell, right? I should mention that dbus, the service runs as root. So if you can get a shell, you're a root.
One small detail.
Yeah, which you kind of expect. It's not like it's a multi-user system, it's a Jeep. But anyway, so the first thing we were like, okay, let's start looking through these methods and seeing if there's any one that has some sort of vulnerability that would allow us to get commands running. So the first thing I thought of was command injection, right? Because then you don't have to mess with shellcode and,
Shellcode's
memory
hard. Let's go
randomization.
shopping was our
No,
motto.
totally. Like, I spent enough time in my life looking at debugger. I don't want to do that anymore. So I looked around, found this nav trail service, which was like a really great service. I don't know what it really does, but it
Navigates the trail, bro.
yeah, it gives you shells. I know for sure.
It should be called shell trail service. Like,
Right. So here is like, so this particular service is backed by Lua scripts, so you can just read the Lua and see if there's problems. And you can see here, you're allowed to pass in through this method params, which is like, in this case, a file name. And then it just shells out to the system and runs remove your file name. So if you give a file name like, blah, semicolon, stuff, it'll just run that stuff.
or just give it a slash and then it removes everything as well.
Don't do that either. Slash. My head unit's broken. So anyway, this is bad. This is, from this alone, if you were connected on Wi-Fi, you could get root stuff running. And I was like all proud of myself. I was like, thank you. I've been hacking for 15 years or whatever, and this is really awesome. And I found a bug. I knew it would be there. Boom. And then
needless to say too, there was like, once you started looking at the code, it was just everywhere.
Yeah, there was more than one.
We just quit. There was so many of them. It was just be done with it.
But then my elation at what a super uber hacker I was kind of came down when I looked further down the list of methods for nav trail service, aka shell service, and I saw there was one of them called execute. And so you can probably guess what this shell does. It doesn't kill you.
No.
What it does is if you give it a command, it executes it. So
if you want to own 1.4 million vehicles, there's 4 lines of Python. We want it to be sexier. That's it.
Yep.
Right there.
So you can see this is 4 lines of Python, like he says, and at the end it invokes the execute method, and then you specify what the command is. In this case, it's like netcatting shells and stuff.
And the nice thing is they have like netcat and all those good utilities already on there for you, so you don't even have to do it.
Yep.
They're already there for you. You just invoke them.
So remote root shell, 4 lines of Python.
Bling.
All the Jeeps. So that's it.
That's a talk. All right, fine. We'll see you. Get out.
Okay, so one funny thing is that at DEF CON and Black Hat last year, we were talking about the attack surface of the Jeep, and we actually showed at one point, Chris eloquently in this picture is showing that an mmap of the Jeep, and you can see port 6667 is open, and of course we laughed about how it was IRC. And so basically that was what our whole talk this year is about, was on that slide last year. All right.
We're dumb like that.
I know, you want to talk about you can execute.
So now we can execute. We're on the infotainment system, right? We're on the head unit. That means we can execute a bunch of cool Lua scripts that do stuff. We wrote GPS Tracker 3000, which come 3001 is going to sound really silly, but we'll worry about that then.
Then it'll just be retro.
Yeah, then it will. It'll be like Nintendo games now. But basically what it did is we got the Jeep to send its GPS coordinates to a web server, and we would pull that web server every so often and then put a pin drop on a Google map. So we could get this running, and I could watch Charlie go to the grocery store, and I could tell you, hey, he's speeding up because the pins are getting farther apart, or hey, he's slowing down, the pins are getting closer together. So we have nice Google map tracking for all your NSA needs, so you can track him wherever he goes, and it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and like we did this, so you don't actually even need to run code to do this. This is just one of the methods that the debug service exports for you.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even need to exploit it, you just ask it.
Right. You're like, yo, what's your GPS?
Yo, what's your GPS? It's like, oh, here you go, man.
Yeah.
As you see, you've probably seen in the Wired videos, HVAC, we could turn AC heating on. You give it a number, it blows cold air in Andy Greenberg's face. I think that's why this method was designed.
Yeah, so it's funny because like all these things you can, the only reason we're putting this code up here is just so you can see how simple it is. So you would think like, oh, turn on the air conditioning, like that's probably super hard.
Yeah.
And, like,
that was like memory corruption and we're doing heat massaging. Like, nope, we're just running a Lua script. We wish it was sexier, but it's not. Actually, I don't. I liked it being easy.
Yeah, it was way better that way.
Radio volume, you can just give it a number. I think 9's the loud, or 32's the loudest or something. I forget.
A number that is not reasonable. So here is basically some of the command. Get out of here.
I can't do it.
It is like hard to do. I must admit, using a computer.
Here's.
Hey Charlie, you ready to hack a car with no wires?
So this is basically all the things, a lot of the things we can do over just on the Uconnect.
LDD 2 port.
So this is like a magician showing that we're not connected.
Hey Charlie, give this car some style.
Yeah.
So
There we
there's
go.
us.
Yeah.
Change the channel for me if you could.
Two handsome bros. And then you can't really hear it, but we just changed the
Turn
radio
that up.
station to a hip hop station.
This is Hot 103, St. Louis finest hip hop and R&B.
So it's so, you can't really tell, but it's so loud, you can't even talk.
And then you can kill the knobs, so you can't turn it down. So the knobs do nothing.
So this is what we did to Greenberg on the highway.
Turn the car off will help.
So then he turned off the
Hopefully
car,
that's better.
and then
Let's get it back to normal, huh?
luckily, you'd think that would fix it, but it doesn't.
Just Phil blasting in your face.
Right. So anyway, you can control the radio, the HV, or the air conditioning. You can GPS. We didn't, but you can imagine turn on the microphone. So anything that has to do with just the radio, you can do at this point.
Good.
All right. So that was like super fun, and like I like hip hop as much as the next person.
Amen.
But it was still like this whole like, well, the guy has to, or the individual has to buy Wi-Fi, and like only idiots like me would pay $30 a month for Wi-Fi.
We learned the first time around when we plugged in and sent messages and controlled cars, and we thought it was so cool, and then everyone shit all over us. And we're like, oh, they're plugged in. We're like, nope, there's no holding back this time. Every time we thought we made a jump, we had to make it better, right?
Right. Yep, that would have been the headline story. Have to buy Wi-Fi. Yeah. Don't buy Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly.
We would have set back the Wi-Fi industry like 10 years. So we're like, well, let's see if we
Call
can
centers are closing all across America.
Yep, and Asia. They climb more from that than the route on Jeep. But so anyway, so we're like, well, let's see if we can do this over the cellular network, because then not only can you do it from far away, but like everyone's will be vulnerable instead of just the idiots who pay for Wi-Fi. So the first thing like we did was we just ran netstat to see, and you can see all the ports except the one guy is not just bound to like the Wi-Fi interface, for example. It's bound to all the interfaces. And so we're like, well, it seems like maybe you can get to it over the cellular network.
Yep.
Of course, we had no idea how to do that.
I don't know how cell phones work, and honestly, I don't like them.
I know how iPhones work, but I don't know how they like talk to other iPhones. So we needed to find out what the IP address of the Jeep was so that we could try to talk to it, right? So ifconfig, of course. The sort of interesting things was there's like all these IP addresses. We didn't know which were which, but the UAP0 is the one for the Wi-Fi interface. And then you get this P01. The one on the left is what your IP address is like locally on the Sprint network. And then the other one, 68, 28, whatever, is what it looks like if you connect out to a service, like outside of the Sprint network, like on the internet in general.
So if you saw in your, logs, that's the IP address that would be there.
Right. So the first thing we're like, you want to tell them your adventure of trying to, so like I had no problem buying one of these femtocells. Is like you buy something, it's easy, but
I bought like 3 femtocells, and I would try to get them working, and I'd have to call Sprint, and I bought a phone with a contract that I no longer need. And every time I would get a new femtocell from eBay, it'd be brand new, and I would call and like, oh yeah, no, that's stolen. And I'm like, what? How is it brand new? It's stolen. So I bought like 3 or 4 femtocells. They were all stolen, but we eventually got one working.
So what he's leaving out is how he stole all the femtocells, and then he tried.
If anyone needs a femtocell after this, I'm out back. They're $19.
So anyway, we hooked up the femtocell, and then I got on a cell phone, a Sprint cell phone, connected to the femtocell. The Jeep happily connected to the Sprint femtocell, and then I was able to talk to port 667 from my phone to the Jeep. So then we were no longer had to worry about whether the Wi-Fi was on. Like even if the Wi-Fi has never been turned on in its entire life, the cellular connection's on, and I can talk to it.
Yeah, we were ecstatic, right? Because it's like, hey, we're doing all this over cellular, and we didn't need to change anything, right? That 4-line Python exploit, the only thing that needed change was the IP address.
Yep, and that took a couple days.
That was some research time right there.
But yeah, so now we had extended from only people who had Wi-Fi to anyone, but we still had to be within the femtocell's range, which is like.
Remember this, the cellular service is on. You don't have to buy it, right? If you have this head unit, it exists.
Right.
Whether you're not paying for anything, it just exists whether you know it or not.
So I got excited and I drove. So first I got rid of the femtocell and I saw it still worked.
Yeah.
So then it was like, oh, well, it's like maybe the range of a cell tower, right? I don't know what that is, like a mile.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Cells.
Right. So, but anyway, it was like more than 30 meters. So it was like, yes. Yeah. Like we're gaining
better range.
So then I drove to the airport by my house and left the Jeep at my house. And then I tried it from there and it still worked. And so I was like, nice, we're up to like 5 miles or something, right?
Yeah.
And then I was like, Chris, try it. So he tries it from Pittsburgh. I'm in St. Louis. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
So we're like, man, damn it. So there's some.
Maybe it's like one tower or like, the how
I
they're-
drove to the airport to be more than one tower, but what do I
Yeah,
know?
but
So maybe it's like a few towers.
Regional or something,
So
yeah.
anyway, it was a bummer. So we had no idea exactly how far it worked. And so then I was like, well, hell, I'm just going on a road trip. So I turned on my car, left in my driveway, and I took off in my other car down the highway. And you can see I'm like in some little gas truck stop somewhere.
Bloomsdale, Missouri.
Yeah.
Beautiful Bloomsdale.
And I tried from there, it still works. And now we're talking like 60, 70 miles or something. And so then finally,
Finally, I get my act together and get my nice Sprint contract phone, which I have a contract for 2 years now. Set it as a Wi-Fi hotspot. Use my computer to use that as a hotspot. Lo and behold, bling, I can reach Charlie's car from Pittsburgh in St. Louis.
so basically he totally screwed up earlier.
Yeah, totally screwed up earlier. I was like, I can't get to it because I don't know how to internet. And then I relearned how to internet and then interneted.
Right, so, yes, for interneting.
For interneting.
Yep. All right. So anyway, so the point is now it's no longer like 10 miles. It's very far. We don't know for sure how far at this
Yeah.
point. It turns out it's anywhere in the Sprint network, which is like the entire United States.
That's nationwide, probably some of Canada, probably some of Mexico.
So now you can just scan the internet, and we know what port we're looking for, 6667. And if you find that port, it's either an IRC server on the Sprint network, probably not,
Yeah.
or it's a vulnerable vehicle.
We consider it a win-win. It's either a car or an IRC server, and either way, we're in. We're good.
Yep. Either way, it's like sweet. So then we ran like a scanner. Oh, and we also know, like, we don't know for sure what Sprint's IP range is, but just by every time you turn the car on and off, you get a different IP address. And just doing that a bunch, you kind of get an idea of like where it shows up. And so it seems like it's always in 21 dot something or 25 dot something.
So we think it's just 2 Class A's. It may or may not be, but all
It's
the
actually
time.
kind of less than that, but
Yeah.
whatever. If you scan that, you'll find or you used to be able to.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later. So back in the day, you used to be able to scan and find like a ton.
Back in the day, last week.
Yeah, I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So so you could just scan cars and know that they were vulnerable because the service was on, and just you didn't have to worry about like what version it was or anything. It's like if that service is there, like it's talking to you and you can do stuff, right? And so then like you can tickle it a little bit more, and it's just essentially like a web server that you can download information from, right? It's a thing, it gives you information. So we did that. So then we
should have been nominated for best server-side exploit for the ponies, but no one nominated.
You're a judge, so you don't qualify. Anyway, you could. So we got the. I can't really read on top here.
Yeah, it's GPS.
So we got the GPS information of the vehicle just by asking politely on port 667, and then we also got the VIN number for the vehicle, which you can look up and see what kind of car it is. And then we wrote this clever script called "Shut Up, Dave," which is for our.
It goes back to Shut Up Theo, and we in a long tradition of shut up scripts.
Right.
Here's ours.
This one's targeted towards Dave Vitale, who says he's anti-junk hacking, anti-stunt hacking.
Okay.
He says hacking cars is easy, stupid, pointless, no impact.
Yeah, no impact, zero impact.
All right. So anyway, so shut up, Dave. So you can run the script, and it just scans the internet, finds cars that were vulnerable, and then tells you what kind of car it is.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Based
crazy.
off the VIN.
Right. And probably the scariest moment of all of our research was when the very first time that I ran that and got the GPS information, and I called up Chris and I was like, hey Chris, I just did it, and it's a car that's driving across Oklahoma right now. It was like, oh no, like this
Yeah,
is bad.
I was like, let me do it. Then I did it. It was like, it's driving across Nebraska. I was like, I quit. Car hacking's too real for me. I'm out.
No, it's crazy. So that was like too real for me. It was way more fun when it was like my car in my driveway, and then it was like, oh my God, there's all these cars that are vulnerable, and like we need to probably get that fixed.
Yeah.
So originally when we talked to Chrysler, they told us that it was only 2014 models. And we didn't really ask, but they didn't really tell us how many cars were affected. And so we did the scanning, besides just being, just for curiosity or whatever, to see what kind of cars we could find that were vulnerable, and like what years, what makes, what models, that kind of stuff, how many there are. So we ran the script for a little bit, and these are the cars that we found that were vulnerable, like just by scanning the internet. The sweetest one was Dodge Viper for sure. So we found the Dodge Viper, and it was like the super top of the line one too.
Yeah.
It was like super
SRT
sweet.
version. Someone spent a pretty penny on that car.
Yep. And then we could have like just cranked the radio.
Yeah,
To a
exactly.
hip hop station.
We could have put Hot
We
103
didn't
on.
do that, but we could have. So anyway, this is the list of the vehicles. So the interesting thing from us before like all the recall happened was it was like not only was it 2014, but it was like 2013 cars, 2015 cars, and so on. So lots of vulnerable vehicles. And it turns out there's actually more than this that that we never just happened to find because we didn't scan that long. And so again, now we know the answer of how many vehicles were vulnerable is 1.4 million because that's what they recalled. But we didn't know. And so the way we did it was I was like out running and I was like, there has to be a way to figure this out, right? Like I've scanned it and like, you know, there should be a way to do this. And it turns out like I had this great idea and I went home and Googled it and some dude who like wanted to know the population of owls did the exact same thing. And so the thing you have to think about is, I was scanning cars. Every time you turn on and off your car, you get a new IP address. But I was getting the VIN number. So I scanned like 2,000 cars, and I noticed that I only found 20 that I found a duplicate VIN number for. And so that means like you would expect that there must be like a lot of cars, right? Because if I would have scanned 2,000 cars and they were almost all duplicates of each other, then there's not that many cars, right?
Yeah, so. Remember, VINs are unique to a car, right? They're like your fingerprint. So each car has a VIN and they don't change.
Right. So I was coming up with this really complicated formula, but it turns out like the owl dude had this formula. I just plugged in the numbers, and the number that it came up with was like around 400,000, which turned out to be a low estimate.
We were conservative and pretty low.
Right. But anyway, it was a lot of cars. But that's why we did the scanning.
Yeah. All right.
But so far in this story, we can only play with your radio. It's
not very cool.
It's kind of cool, but not super cool.
Anyone could naysay that. You can only turn on the radio.
Right. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we had to do now was figure out how this part worked, right? We made these diagrams last year at Black Hat, and we knew the radio touched both CAN buses. We just needed to figure out how.
Right, and this is one of the reasons we chose the Jeep in the first place, because it has this diagram, and it's like, okay, if you own the radio, you're on all the CAN buses, like game over.
Yeah. We assumed, we named it, the most hackable car because that's what we thought we could get into the easiest, right?
But we were wrong.
We were wrong. Yeah. The way it actually works is you have this OMAP board that has all your stuff on it, and it was connected to a daughter board that had a V850 chip through a serial line they implemented SPI for their communications, right?
Serial peripheral interface.
Yeah, I don't know what it's.
So the V850 is on the CAN network. The V850 can send CAN messages. The V850 can listen to CAN messages. The OMAP chip that we're on can't.
Yeah.
It can only talk to the other chip.
But this is a problem. We can't send CAN messages, and to control a car, we said you need CAN message injection.
And this is why Chrysler and other companies have correctly said no, there's isolation between the infotainment system and the CAN network. They're on separate systems. They can't do it. And so they're kind of right that there were many months that I tried to send CAN messages from the OMAP chip, trying to figure out, there must be a way.
Running through Lewis scripts, trying to figure out which ones may be able to send a CAN message.
Right.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure that out.
Right, but there wasn't.
Yeah.
They was separate, but
as we know, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, so kinda isn't right. We identified the chip as a V850 FJ3 series chip. And the nice thing is we knew we had a firmware for it because it came in the ISO update that you could download offline.
Right. So when you stick the USB stick update into your car, it updates the files on the OMAP chip, but it also can reflash and update the V850 chip with new firmware if it needs to.
So long story short, there's also a script that says, hey, take this as a parameter and flash the V850 chip over SPI. And there's no code signing, and there's really no check. So all you have to do is come up with a bootleg firmware that you wrote yourself that does stuff, and you can update the chip, no questions asked. So that's how you get from being on the head unit to actually being on the V850 chip. I'm going to fly through the rest of these because it's really boring, but look through the paper. We read data sheets a lot. We read a lot of data sheets. We read a lot of data sheets.
This is 3 months worth of reading data sheets.
Yeah, basically reading data sheets. Finally, the nice thing is IDA Pro had a processor module for the V850ES. We found the base addresses.
This is hacking, not Mr. Robot.
Yeah, this is the hacking part where you're just sitting there for 3 months going through all this crap.
Even if Christian Slater really, really wants you to hack a car, it's still going to take 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. So you set up the segments. We found a bunch of cool values. There's GP relative addressing. Again, read the paper. There's a bunch of sections. We found where CAN buffers were, right? Cross-reference those to other pieces in the code. And we found, hey, according to the data sheet, here's values that set things like the ID and the data and all that good stuff. Our only problem was we couldn't call this function directly from anywhere. So we knew we could set up data, and we knew we could get this function to send data we wanted, but we had no way to call it. So what did we do? We're like, OK, we'll find the spy parser and figure out if we can send spy messages, and then basically trampoline that code into some other code where we write shell code and do code with code.
So basically, since that made no sense.
Yeah. I was trying to be funny. It wasn't really funny.
Yeah, so we looked in the firmware, the existing firmware, to see if there was some way the OMAP could sort of signal to send like an arbitrary can message. But no matter how hard we looked, we couldn't find that way. So we decided we were going to have to make a method that would do that, and then we would send a spy message, a serial peripheral interface message to the V850 saying, OK, send this message with this data now, please.
Yep.
And that's the approach we had to do.
Sidebar. There's a bunch of mem copies to fixed size buffers that take the size from the spy message. Again, I think we gave up looking for these after we found a few.
Yeah. So the point is, like, you could reflash, like, we're going to reflash the firmware on the V850 chip because there's no code signing. But even if they had code signing, we could have bypassed that by exploiting these memory corruption bugs on the V850 from spy.
But luckily we didn't. Basically,
luckily we did nothing hard.
Yeah. Well, we wrote shellcode by hand. That's kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
Basically, it was, hey, use the spy code as a trampoline. If it sees this byte, it jumps. It jumps to our shellcode that we put in unused section of the ROM. Our shellcode sets up the buffers, blah, 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 sends a message, returns. We're all good. Boom. That's how you send messages from being on a wireless chip through SPY to reprogram the V850 chip. The V850 now contains our backdoored firmware. If it receives this command, it's going to look at these bytes. If it sees that bytes, it's going to trampoline to our code. That's going to take the data out of the SPY messages we just sent and use that as CAN data, and we can send arbitrary messages. So that's how you can physically control a car from wireless to internal.
All right, so that bypass. Oh, thanks. So that bypasses the so-called separation.
Yeah.
One small little hurdle that we had to bypass on the way, though, was the system, while it is designed for the OMAP chip to update the V850 chip, it's only designed to do that like with the USB stick in and a guy sort of pressing the buttons and all sorts of other stuff, which we don't have remotely. And so there was just some sort of exercise to go through to do that. And it's kind of hard because you can only update the V850 if it's in bootloader mode, and if you put it in bootloader mode, it like resets the OMAP chip, and then you lose control. Anyway, read the paper if you want details. It was slightly difficult.
Yeah,
we did.
Yeah, it happened. What happens when it goes wrong?
Yeah,
you end up in a Jeep
sad days.
It was covered under warranty every time, which is the best part.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I gotta say for Chrysler is they stand behind their product.
Hey, they are. That's for sure.
So yeah, every time that we would mess up, this happened twice, that if you mess up flashing the V850, then the head unit just doesn't work anymore. And so the first time what happened was I was flashing it, and like you can't, like there's no like output that is going on. So it was flashing, I didn't know what it was doing, and I was like, fuck this, I just turned it off. It was like half flashed and never came back on again. Don't do that. And the real upgrade mechanism doesn't let you do that. It has safety. I have no safety. I was driving with my seatbelt off. Yeah. So then, again, I take it to the dealer, and they're like, "What happened?" I was like, "Yeah, the like screen doesn't come on anymore." So yeah, so then I try not to use like words like head unit or like chips or anything. I'm just like, the screen is all black. I don't know.
And he's just texting me. He's like, I think they're buying it. They're gonna give us a new head unit. I was like, all right, sweet.
Yeah. I mean, so to be fair, I never lied.
That's true.
I never lied. They're like,
work.
It didn't. The screen did not work. And then they're like, what happened? I was like, it just doesn't come on.
Yeah, that's true. We got a boogie.
Nah, we're fine. All right. And then the second time, I think I just screwed up something, and
you just went in there again. It was like, it don't work, and they're like, okay.
I was like, there's something wrong, or it doesn't work again. And then I really was very, very careful after that, because I was like, I think at 3.
At 3 they might be like, don't come back.
Right. So yeah. All right. So let's see. You want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to go through very simply how this works, right? You get on a cell network.
Like how would this attack actually?
How's this go down? You get on a cell network, right? You have your cell phone, you have your laptop, you have mass scan, you're scanning for cars. You find one with an IP. You connect to it. Then you get code running on that OMAP chip, right? But that OMAP chip can't send CAN messages. So from that OMAP chip, you reprogram the V850 chip with your backdoored firmware. That way you can send messages to the OMAP chip. The OMAP chip takes that data, sends it on the SPI line to the V850. The V850 consumes it. Since you have it backdoored, you send CAN messages. Then you put Andy in a ditch. That's step 4.
That's step 4 of the attack? Andy.
Send arbitrary CAN messages.
Yeah, so one thing to say real quick is that if you walk up to a Jeep, you don't know its IP address, and we don't know a way to really find its IP address besides looking at the VIN or the GPS, and then just scanning all the Jeeps until you find that one.
Yeah.
So that's one limitation. It's easier to hack all the Jeeps than to hack an individual Jeep.
Which is kind of backwards.
You don't even know how to run this thing. Okay, so here's like the whole attack chain. Go. So
I'm gonna fire the exploit here.
So we're gonna fire the exploit, reflash the V850 chip, and then be able to send CAN messages. This is like the whole attack.
You'll notice that
It's very boring. I'm yawning. But so I said the exploit. It's downloading the firmware. It's rebooting right now. You can see it's black. It's not. I mean, sorry, it's not rebooting. It's flashing the V850 right now. So it takes like 30 seconds for the V850 to be completely reflashed.
Send CAN messages. So.
And you'll notice that we're so good, we're very, so now it's rebooting back up into normal mode. At this point, the backdoored firmware is there, we're good to go.
You see, that's how long it took to install the backdoored firmware. So you would notice the screen go off for a little bit, but it's not alarming by any means.
But don't turn off the car.
Don't turn off the car.
But yeah, so, and you can do that while you're driving down the road or whatever. What else was I gonna say about it?
Oh, we've been working on this a long time. You can see it's winter when this video
Oh
is
yeah,
filmed.
that's what I was gonna say. We're very responsible. We reported this so long ago.
There's snow on the ground.
Come on, I have a winter hat on.
We're gonna make it
All right, so let me fast forward a little bit. A little bit more. So in this one, I'm waiting for the Wi-Fi to come back up. This is what the big wait is, because I want to connect in and send the messages.
Let's try it out here.
And Charlie yawns another time.
It's like 7 a.m. or something. I can only hack off hours. Now I'm going to tell it to turn the windshield wipers on, which requires CAN messages.
There we go. Now I think it's running. And there it goes.
Yay!
Complete hack.
So that's end-to-end hack right there.
So if there were a pwn to own, everyone would say, Charlie Miller hacked a Jeep in 30 seconds. But in reality, it's a year's worth of work.
Yeah, maybe a minute on that one.
Yeah, maybe a minute.
Maybe like Charlie Miller getting slow. Takes 1 minute.
Slow in his old age, what are you going to do?
Roll.
All right, so we had to get the diagnostic tools. I'm going to burn through this as well. Unfortunately for the Jeep, they were near $7,000, and I told them I was, the best tuner in Western PA for Jeeps, so they hooked me up, paid for all that. There's security unlocks, right? To get security access, we talked about these things before. It wasn't traditional. Couldn't find the algorithms. Actually, in the code, it was Java, so it decompiled right nice for us, but we couldn't find anything. They had obfuscated strings. After digging around for a while, we found these constructors where they actually took those files that were encrypted in the previous screen in the upper right and decrypted them. And the cool thing was all their decryption passwords were leet speak, so this one is generation.
Generation!
So it was pretty cool. I was like, word up.
Super hackers.
Yeah.
So they wrote their mechanics tools in Java, and then they were worried someone would reverse it, so they paid for this commercial obfuscator.
Yeah.
And then Chris just fucking obfuscated it, or
slapped it in the face.
just totally reversed it anyway.
I do condone violence on crappy code. That's the only thing I condone violence for. Also, we couldn't figure out the checksums for the car. They were different than anything we've seen. Best way to do that, grab yourself some hardware, get yourself some firmware, reverse yourself some firmware, and then look for XOR, because we figured that's involved. And lo and behold, we found the checksum routines for everything using the Jeep. So that'll be in our package, and it'll show you how to do all that stuff.
And that allows you to send arbitrary CAN messages of whatever you want instead of just replaying.
Before we had to replay because we didn't know the checksum, so we had to replay message we saw. But with this, we could craft arbitrary messages with any bytes, run this checksum routine, and it would fix it up.
So
that was like a couple weeks too. So that was
that was a lot. So all that was left was finding messages to send, like how do I control the steering, how do I control the brakes? And the way you do that is you just drive around and make those situations happen, and then record it. So you remember last year, I don't know if you came to our talk last year, we showed this video where we were trying to get the automatic collision prevention system to engage so we could capture the packets. And the way we did that was, sorry, I gave away the secret there. The way we did that is we got some cardboard boxes out and we drove into them hoping it would stop us.
And that didn't work.
It didn't work. So, like afterwards, after the talk, everyone kept coming up. you idiots, like it only works on metal.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so this year
Let's
we're
get
like,
ourselves some metal.
yeah.
By the way, the people at Home Depot probably thought we were sociopaths, just bought a bunch of trash cans.
Okay,
Did
so
we return these? I believe we asked.
So we this year we also put a phone with a camera running on the thing we were gonna hit if we hit it. Hopefully we would stop in time. So that's what this view is. Oh no, this is trying to find a place to actually do the testing. We set up the trash cans and people just keep walking up to the trash
Like,
cans.
oh, trash cans with a camera on it.
Yeah.
And
Like,
then we had to scare this little girl out of the parking lot.
it's like, get out of here. So we finally found a place to do it. So here we are. This is heading towards the camera.
The camera exploded upon impact, so I think that's...
So if you listen, you can hear how fast we're going. We're like hauling ass around this corner. But anyway, that's the end of that camera's footage. For some reason, you'll find out why in a second. So here is the side view footage.
It got a little bit loud. And... oh no.
Once again, the collision prevention system did not work.
This is out front of his kid's school, by the way.
Yeah, having metal did not make any difference at
Didn't
all.
make any difference. So if you're gonna get metal, don't try it. We tested, doesn't work. Save
Right.
yourself a couple $100. Yeah.
Okay, you want to do some of these?
Yeah.
Go for it. Oh, you don't know how to run the movies.
Yeah,
Get
yeah,
out of here. So anyway, we got to hurry up, but we figured out eventually how to do that.
These are the Lewis scripts that we would use to actually send the CAN message on the car. You
Right.
see they're in this weird format. Look at the paper. They'll tell you the format of how we used it.
So here's some of the stuff we could do. You can make the windshield wipers come on with like the spray. It was like hard to see what was going on. Of course, we did that to poor Andy Greenberg. All right.
As you see, we tested the turn signals. Just skip the turn signals. No one wants to see that.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah, no one wants to
Okay.
see turn signals.
Speedometer.
Yeah, that's all right.
It meets your goal.
Yeah.
So here I'm doing 70, but if you look, my speedometer
Yeah,
says
drops to 40. And you'd be like, I swear, officer, I wasn't speeding.
Right.
Look at my
I
speedometer.
approve.
I have
I
a camera
approve.
on it.
All right, you can do locks as well. So here I am pulling up. I'm gonna get out of the car and lock it and walk away.
You should hear the beep when he locks it.
I swear it just beeped.
Yeah.
But anyway, then we'll fast forward here a bit.
Then I sent the command to unlock the doors over the cell network because the car stays alive for quite some time after you turn it off. Unlock the doors, and I can get my coffee back even though Charlie locked it in there.
Cheers.
Listen to me. Oh, you missed
yeah,
it. But I acted like I was a thug who was like, what are you doing in my car?
Yeah.
But anyway. And then here is what we actually did to Greenberg that got everyone all upset. Here's where you make the transmission stop functioning. So I'm giving it full gas, I'm in drive, but it won't go anywhere.
I'll try reverse maybe?
So I try switching gears, I'm just stuck.
No, I'm stuck.
All right. So those are normal CAN messages. You can also do diagnostic ones. Again, like check out our old papers and stuff for the difference between those. But here's the brakes not working, which is what we put Andy in a ditch with.
Yeah.
We don't put ourselves in ditches.
No, that's for Greenberg.
So Chris is trying to stop here, but you can see he's still actually moving.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So we think if we did enough research, we could do those at speed someday, but that's for a later day.
So I'll skip over how you do the more complicated attacks, but here's the effect. So here is controlling steering.
So I'm not touching anything?
Essentially, it takes the ECU offline, then we send messages pretending that we're the ECU, picking up where the traffic left off. That way it'll listen to only our messages, and its messages won't be...
So I'm driving his car from remotely.
Yeah.
And if you'll listen,
I'm gonna go right next to it.
so I'm gonna drive next to a pole.
Parallel park it.
Okay. Here we go, I'm gonna loop right by it. There it is. Oh no, it's a little tight. There we
All right,
go.
so
Try to parallel park.
So I almost hit the pole, but I didn't. So anyway, you can control the steering pretty well. It's pretty awesome.
Braking the same way. Take
All
the
right,
ECU
let's go
offline,
reverse.
send the message. The car will stop without someone pressing the brakes.
So, brakes. All right, so should we just like book it through this?
Yeah.
So we disclosed it in October. The cool thing that happened was after the Greenberg story happened, not only did they eventually do the recall and have fixes for the thing, but Sprint blocks port 667 traffic now, so you can't get to even the cars that aren't patched, which is like super awesome.
Yeah, that's the biggest fix is Sprint not allowing you to communicate on that port.
Yeah,
Yeah,
way to go.
good job.
That's good. So right now there's no cars we can hack.
Yeah.
So Here is a video rendition of us disclosing this information. Some website had this, and it's fucking hilarious.
The duo had been sharing their findings.
Look at us
with
just
Chrysler
chew
for
the
9
boardroom
months,
out.
allowing the company
Chew
to
'em
release
out.
a patch. Chrysler did not acknowledge or credit them for their work.
Chrysler Anima bots look very scared.
They looked scared.
And then this is me trying to get other people to let me test on their vehicles, and they, for some
They
reason,
say no.
they won't let us test.
Selfish jerks.
The effect of the patch is this, that instead of ports being open, now they're filtered. That's the fix.
Impact.
Cars got recalled.
Recall, that's cool. Hackers did something. A physical change happened, and it wasn't within the InfoSec community. It was within the real world. So that was we were most proud of. Lawmen want to do laws, so that's something.
Yep, so yeah, we worked with these senators, and they issued this legislation. They introduced it the day of the story. I'm not going to brag about this, but we made the stock go down.
If we were lesser men, we would have shorted it, but we're honest people.
Yeah, we could have. And then just to rub it in a little bit, like traditional bugs, like I always find, never affected the
stock price.
This is stage fright. Sorry, J-Duck didn't
Sorry,
affect
wherever you
stock
are.
price.
If you're really cool, Twitter will follow you the day after the Wired story comes out to make sure you're up to no more mischief.
Yeah, so now Chrysler follows Chris.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'll go through this real quick. Remote compromises are capable, right? We don't have to prove this anymore. We don't have to do it on every car. Just know that it's possible. This is not a Chrysler Fiat issue. This is an everybody issue. This is the OEMs. This is the tier ones that give them stuff, and this is the telecom companies that provide them communications. They all need to work together to get these fixed. It was better that Sprint blocked the port and Chrysler released a patch than just one of them acting alone.
Yep.
And like I said, hackers can make a real world difference. This isn't just InfoSec anymore. We affect the real world. People know about this stuff that aren't in the industry, and it's awesome. And we want people to continue to do this work. Take this, go do new cars, do new stuff.
Yep. And that's it. Thanks, everybody. Clapping for yourself?
I'm clapping for them, soccer style.